Is your boss good in an emergency? I was cleaning Josh's teeth when I noticed his eyes rolling back in his head and my stomach dropped. He'd just gotten back from deployment 2 weeks ago and was showing me videos of his 4-year-old tackling him at the airport, and now he might have been making her an orphan. I ran to Dr. Stevens and told him we needed to call 911, but he laughed and said Josh was just having dental anxiety, and veterans get panic attacks all the time in dental chairs. Josh raised his right hand to his head, but his left arm stayed dead on the armrest, and when he tried to say his daughter's name, it came out as gibberish. Stevens leaned over him and said loudly and slowly, like Josh was stupid, that everything was fine, and dental anxiety makes people feel strange sensations. I said we needed to call an ambulance right now because I thought he was having a stroke, but Stevens pulled me into the hallway and said if I called 911 and disrupted his practice over a panic attack, he'd fire and report me for practicing medicine without a license. I went back to Josh and his eyes were full of tears, but only the right side of his face could cry, and he kept trying to say something about his daughter, but the words wouldn't come out right. Stevens came back with the anesthetic needle saying once Josh was numb, he'd calm down, and I knew if he gave a local anesthetic to someone mid-stroke, it could complicate everything. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while Stevens screamed at me to hang up immediately, and I told the dispatcher we had a 32-year-old male patient presenting with facial droop, slurred speech, and left side paralysis. Stevens tried to grab my phone and kept yelling that I was creating unnecessary panic over a veteran with PTSD having a completely normal trauma response to dental work. Josh was trying to get out of the chair, but his left leg wouldn't work, and he looked at me with this pure terror in his eyes because he knew what was happening even if Stevens wouldn't admit it. The dispatcher said paramedics were 3 minutes out, and Stevens said those 3 minutes would cost me my entire career because he'd make sure everyone knew I was a hysteric who traumatized patients. Josh's breathing got weird and raspy, and he managed to get out the word Bella, which was his daughter's name, and it broke my heart because he knew he might never see her again. Stevens was still trying to proceed with the root canal, saying Josh needed to stop being dramatic and that plenty of patients had anxiety, but Josh's eyes started rolling back. I held Josh's hand and kept talking to him about Bella and how she needed her daddy to come home from this appointment too, and Stevens was on the phone with his lawyer asking about liability if a rogue employee called emergency services without authorization. Josh squeezed my hand with his right hand, but the left side of his body was completely limp and his breathing was getting shallower. Stevens came back and said he'd documented everything, and when Josh was fine in 10 minutes, I'd be paying for the ambulance call and losing my license. The sirens were getting closer, but Josh's skin was turning gray, and I kept thinking about that video of Bella jumping into his arms at the airport, how she'd wrapped her tiny legs around him and wouldn't let go. Stevens was actually prepping the dental dam for the root canal while Josh was dying in the chair, saying if we just proceeded with treatment, Josh would realize he was fine. I put my fingers on Josh's wrist and his pulse was all wrong, too fast, then too slow, and he wasn't responding when I said his name. The paramedics burst in, and Stevens immediately started telling them this was unnecessary and Josh just had dental anxiety, but they took one look at Josh and started working on him frantically. They were shouting medical terms I didn't understand and putting oxygen on him while Stevens stood there saying he didn't consent to treatment in his facility, and one paramedic told him to shut up or get out. They got Josh on their gurney, but he wasn't moving at all anymore, just this awful stillness, and I heard one paramedic say something about the golden hour already being passed. Stevens was screaming that when Josh was fine, he'd sue me for everything, but all I could see was Josh's phone lighting up on the counter with a picture of Bella as his wallpaper. They rushed him out, and I heard them calling ahead to the hospital about a possible hemorrhagic stroke, and the last thing I saw was Josh's still face disappearing into the ambulance, and I didn't know if Bella would ever get her daddy back. The sirens got quieter and quieter until they were gone completely, and I just stood there with my hands shaking, so bad I had to grab the counter to steady myself. Stevens slammed the door so hard the whole room shook, and his face was this